Hello, hello. How's everybody doing? Happy Tuesday. I tell you, how is everyone? We are excited today. Welcome to the Real Talk Show. I am Dr. Kim Brown Barber, better known as Dr. Kim from Journey to Becoming. And Real Talk is a live stream podcast designed with the mindset of connecting and inspiring, motivating, supporting, and uniting women around the world. It is a safe place where women can come together and discuss the real issues and challenges that women face in today's society. It has been designed to be a safe place where women can share their wisdom, receive wisdom, talk about whatever is on their mind and whatever is in the world to make it a better place. Because we need more of this, right? Open, honest, loving conversation. So thank you guys. Can please give a welcome to the co-host, none other than Rochelle Lawson, Queen of Feeling Fabulous.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Real Talk Show. I'm going to keep it short because I'm in an environment that I can't control. And I have this beautiful, beautiful big Rottweiler right here that wants to get all in the camera with me. I should just let him join the show.
That's all right. It's the Real Talk Show. Come
on in. You want to say hi, baby? Huh? Come say hi. Come say hi. Let me see if I can get him. Come on.
Go say hi.
Let me see. Come on, big boy.
That's the nice thing about the Real Talk Show.
Look at the camera.
Ooh, yeah. Oh, yeah. He wants to protect mama.
He's trying to what's so funny? Mama. He's being so shy, but he's not shy.
Now he's like, no, I don't even want to be bothered. Auntie, excuse me.
Auntie, welcome everyone to the show, and let's get started with some good conversation.
Thanks.
Awesome. So at this time, we want to take the time to thank our guest panelists with us today. We want them to introduce themselves. Welcome, Miss Tequila Hughes from the East Coast representing. Let's give a hand for Miss Tequila Hughes. Can you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself. Do you have kids? Do you not have kids? I mean, do you want kids? Do you not want kids? You trying to give some away? What?
Give some away. No, I like she said, I'm Tequila Hughes, and I'm based in Kentucky. I have 3 children, ages. They're gonna get me 20.
Sounds 24. Sounds like you don't know.
24, 19, 13, and then I have a grandbaby that's 1, a little girl. So I'm excited about her. I have a husband. We've been married for 14 years, and I have a dog.
You got a dog?
I love Lady. She's old. She's 13 years old, but we love her. I have a bachelor's degree in social work, but I actually work in the field of clinical research for a insurance company. I just started a new job, so I'm excited about that.
Yay, congrats.
Yeah, I've been knowing Dr. Kim Barber for a long time, and I love it. So glad to be a part of this group tonight.
Thank you. We're so glad you're here. Oh my goodness, yes. All right, Professor Ondine Gage, representing the West Coast.
Well, it is my great pleasure to join you. I'm a professor of education. My background is actually linguistics, so I teach pre-service elementary school teachers. And I do a lot of work in international programs, primarily to partner university students with professors around the world. Are you getting background on
a little bit of feedback? Yeah.
I'm not sure why.
But that's okay. Sometimes putting the headphones in will help. I'm not sure. That's why I have my headphones in, because sometimes I get feedback. But we keep it real and we keep it going. So you can try to see. Can you guys hear any feedback now?
I can't.
Okay. All right. So maybe that's okay now. All right. So we're gonna get going. Rochelle, you have anything you want to say before we start all of our questions?
No, not at
Okay.
all.
All right.
I'm ready to
you
roll.
got that look on your face. I don't know whether it's the dog that's giving you, you trying to give love to the dog or what, but that's all good. So the first question I want to know, ladies, and this it doesn't matter whether you have kids that are in school or not in school, you have an opinion of this because it's one of the biggest things that a lot of households are talking about. Should schools open back? Like, how safe do you feel about your children or children coming back into the environments that they're coming back into? How safe do you feel about that? And I know that's why I purposely said West Coast, East Coast, that because I know it's being done differently everywhere. So that's why I said that, so that people can also understand that you guys are coming from a different perspective. So, can you start, Miss Tequila Hughes, with talking about a little bit about that for us, please? And then we'll hear from Professor Ondine.
Yeah, sure. So I was apprehensive at first, just because it was so much unknown, and we kept getting delayed. They would push it back. Then, okay, we get a start date. They push it back. But once they gave us a definite date, and they in Kentucky, they rolled ours out. So we had, in my county, we had certain levels of grade school kids went back at different times. Report the numbers, and they had to wear masks all day. So I was like nervous about that because my skin problems from wearing the mask.
Oh, wow.
As she was breaking out, you're holding in all those germs when you think about it.
Yeah.
I was nervous about that aspect of just wearing it all day long. But I was kind of excited because she wanted to go back. Notice that, I have a student that was a straight A student, and there was a decline in her grades. And wasn't doing the work, but because sometimes the platforms weren't as user friendly as they could have been, or they would change them from what they did at the end of last year. And it was just, every teacher wasn't consistent with how they expected the students to engage in class, or so she was missing work that she'd never missed before. So she was like, I think if I go back, I'll do better. So I had a little bit of that apprehension and that concern and a little bit of excitement because she wanted to be around her friends. She wanted to be normal, as we all, it's become our like code word, whatever that is. But just being a regular kid and being able to participate in school activities and sports, like all of that was important to her. So to me, but not even knowing how that would work. So it was, you just were uneasy, you kind of didn't know, but you wanted it, but then you would hear, like, wait, hold, and then you'd have to hear information. And because the information wasn't always consistent with maybe what other states were doing, like we're going to hear from the West Coast, it made us think, is this really the right move for our state if states aren't moving toward that? So that was my initial thoughts.
Wow, that you really covered a lot in there, and even some pieces that I thought about, and I hadn't heard anybody say anything about, but I thought about myself, because you're right. Like when you have the mask on all day, you do, and don't work out in it, and have the mask on. It's like, oh my gosh, feel like I need to go get a facial right afterwards or something. So,
we actually got a special mask so she could do sports that was supposed to absorb more moisture.
Oh, wow.
Then even in doing sports, they didn't really enforce the kids to wear it outside.
Okay.
I don't know.
Oh, see, it sounds like it was a lot of inconsistencies where you were just kind of like really concerned about it, but yet you were excited because your daughter was excited about going back and engaging, and because she's an athlete and being able to go back and be involved in those things. But it sounds like for your state, you had a lot of things opening up a little bit sooner than you were comfortable at first.
Yeah, especially the schools, just because we didn't know the requirements and how they were going to arrange the classrooms, how they were going to eat lunch, all to your head, because, cafeteria is like a assembly line. So you're breathing on the food, but they then told us they're going to have packaged food, packaged lunch. You could bring your lunch. So it's a little different setup for them, and staying in certain classes maybe a little longer. We'll say going back like her grades. I mean, she had a D and she never had a D, and then she went back to making A's. So I
Wow.
value for some students, especially that young, being able to be that independent, to be online. And I work from home, so I could kind of stay on track, keep her on track as much as possible. But my heart went out to those parents that didn't have the ability. And how do you keep a 10-year-old online all day when they really think it's an extended summer break? So
right. Wow. Professor Ondine, I know you have something to add to the conversation with that. So, I mean, same question. How did you feel did you feel it was safe with kids going back in the environment like it is? And I know on the West Coast is a little bit different than how it was on on the East Coast. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think initially people were very afraid. Our COVID numbers were quite high, mostly because we're a densely populated state. And it really made people feel very uncomfortable. But as I said, I work with professors around the world. So I have a collaboration going with a professor in Spain. And they were in January, they were in their third wave of the pandemic.
Wow.
Yes. And yet, even though they hadn't rolled out the vaccine in Europe yet in January, they had gone back to school in September. Now, I found this really fascinating. So they had a plan A and a plan B. Plan A was they wore masks all day. They measured the distance between students. It was 2 meters. And the children had to put their arms out. If they could touch fingers, they were too close. They had little plexiglass in the classroom. They had on the playground, they had marked out the play areas for the children. And imagine poor children, they have to stay in their circle. That's just But, it was so interesting. She said to me, we forget as adults how resilient our kids are. And they went back to school, but they had very strict hygiene protocol because they had consistent leadership. We did not have consistent leadership as we. So, when the mask wearing became politicized, it caused our country to go into chaos, which that's not what we expect of leaders. In Spain, they went back to school in September, and she said in the last time I spoke with her we haven't exchanged emails recently, but I presume everything's still okay. They had not had a single outbreak in 400 children.
Wow.
So, and I think this is the consistent messaging we're getting from the Center for Disease Control and the science behind this, saying if we follow protocols, if we wear masks and we're careful, in fact, now they're saying the hand washing isn't really such a big deal. It's the aerosol, from our aspiration. It's really more of a concern. But if we wear masks, we shouldn't be concerned that we could be fine. But I think it's a very personal choice, and it doesn't make families feel comfortable when the leadership is inconsistent. And I think that's a concern. Now, to speak to some of the points Tequila mentioned, I'm currently supervising several students in their senior thesis for their bachelor's degree. They're all going to be teachers. They choose their own topic. And so I've got to read some really interesting papers by students, for example, who are looking into different aspects of our virtual education. So in environments where the internet wasn't good, and I'm going to say that there's a corridor in California, there's several corridors, especially in rural California, the internet is abysmal. Definitely. That is the problem of our leaders, not our schools. That is our leaders, because our government has not made agreements to have consistent Wi-Fi. We should have consistent Wi-Fi. In 2002, I taught in South Korea. Their Wi-Fi was way ahead of ours. And it was shocking to me because I came think coming from the US, we're going to be technologically advanced, but when we don't have consistent leadership that makes these decisions and supports our advancement, then we have these inequities and students couldn't study from home. And we really saw that as a whole, not only in education, but in industry. In fact, one of my students had found a 2018 article where the agricultural industry was complaining to the government because the same issue, there were competing companies in this agricultural thoroughfare, and so they weren't able to use the high speed internet which they need for their agricultural equipment. So it really, to me, it speaks to our need to kind of get on the boat, with the rest of the world, and really have a comprehensive Wi-Fi and comprehensive internet services. It really should, in today's world, it should be like going to school. Everyone has to go to school. Everyone should be able to have Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
I really feel it's important. Now,
yes,
with regard to choices of whether you wanted to send your child to school or not, I think that's a highly personal choice. It depends upon family health issues. If people have compromised immune system, they didn't want to expose their children, and I completely understand that. But as you said, Tequila, children suffer from the lack of socialization. That is a message I've heard over and over again in my students' research this semester. Because of the depression, children suffer from being away from their friends. And as you see, grades going down. In fact, one student did a very interesting study. She was comparing homeschooling with public schooling and which weathered the pandemic better. And she found the homeschooling did. But then I questioned, what are the strategies that they're using that are different? Well, in those programs, children are really set up to work much more independently. So I think, that's kind of an interesting thing to think about, and I think it opens up some things maybe we should question, because when you look at other parts of the world, what are they doing? So, for example, in different parts of Poland, children don't go to school for a full day. They finish school around, it increases an hour per every grade level. So kindergartners, they're in school for a couple of hours and then they add a grade level. So that allows children to be able to spend more time at home and kind of have more time developing the fortitude to last all day, because I think probably most parents would agree, and I know I experienced this when my son was little, they get tired when they're around their friends. So much stimulus, and each year they go to school, they get a little older, a little stronger, they handle it just a little bit better. So it's interesting. I think
it is. Rochelle, what do you think about all this? She's given a great international perspective and some other things. Rochelle, what do you think about that?
Unfortunately, we're in the United States, so we have to deal with what we got to work here. It's great to look at all the things that are happening in countries around the world, but everybody looks to us, right? So we need to deal with what we have here and make what we have here better and more available to those that have limited access. With regards to the homeschooler program, it was already set up. I don't know why things weren't implemented when the children had to stay at home to get educated, that they didn't follow that model, because that model's already been set up, has been utilized for a long time, and it's been successful. I think a lot of, from what my understanding is, a lot of some of the breakdown, because I couldn't understand, why when my grandkids, I'm like, well, why are they only in school for an hour? It seemed like they were just very minimal time. And I'm like, they're gonna be a stupid generation of kids, because they don't have the opportunity to learn what they need to learn at the appropriate age. And most likely all of these children will get passed on to the next grade, which is a disservice to those that really should not be promoted due to they need additional assistance, education, knowledge base with regards to what happened during COVID. But my understanding was that because technology could only handle so many students at a time, and it was a school district thing versus I want to say a department or corporate thing, that the bandwidth wasn't great enough to have 30 kids online for that particular teacher, for that classroom, and that being develop better infrastructure for a future. I think it will go a little bit more towards that, and they may open up things so that the children can have more socialization if we come to that part. But I experienced different things with my kids. My daughter did go to kindergarten, and she was in kindergarten from 8 to 3. And in that year, and she went to school when she was 4. So in that year, she came out of kindergarten, learned how to read. She knew how to write handwriting, cursive writing, which they learn in 3rd grade. She knew her multiplication times table up to 12. I mean, there was a huge benefit. So I understand that all children aren't equipped or ready. Typically, boys tend to be a lot slower when it comes to that in the socialization capacity. But I think it should be left up to the individual parent to decide which curriculum they feel is best for their child. And with regards to all of this COVID stuff, because I don't consider Kentucky east, I consider it east of California, but I'm down in San Antonio too, and those kids went back to school. I want to say in September as well. They did it. They rolled it out, but those kids have been in school. Now they're getting ready to get out of school, and I guess the next week or so for the summer. So I didn't see any transmission. I'm talking about seniors all the way down to kindergartners. There was no geographic information with regards to demographics of increase in COVID cases during children that were back in school. So I think it's a good thing. I think they need to be in school. I understand the socialization. My little grandson told me he hates being homeschooled because he doesn't get to interact with his friend. And he's a smart boy, but he's like, I don't get to interact with my friends. What if I have a question? Sometimes the teacher can't answer the question. I can't walk up to the teacher and ask my own personal question and things of that nature. So it's interesting. I'm just glad I don't have not raising children in this day and age. That's for sure. It's gonna be interesting, and hopefully by the time these kids grow up, I'll be too old to really care.
I'm telling you, it's interesting already.
It definitely needs to be prepared for the future.
Yeah,
you're right for sure.
You're right. I tell you. So you guys brought up some excellent points.
Yes.
And we are seeing how where we're hearing parts of the stories of how things were impacted. And I'm kind of curious from you, Minister Tequila Hughes, about how it impacted, because you actually have a child that is at your home, and even though you're working from home, how did it impact your house when all of a sudden you were at home, you were working from home, you were by yourself, everybody else is out the house at a certain time, goodbye. And now all of a sudden, everybody's encroaching upon what used to be your territory. Talk to me about how that impact of COVID and the change with school, how that impacted your household.
Yeah, it was a challenge, but because my kids were older, my son that I had in school, he was actually a senior in 2020. So we didn't get to experience, the graduations. I did a prom. We tried to take senior pictures and do those things, but he was happy not to go to school because he's been going to school for 13 years. So he's kind of like, I don't care. It was a challenge because the extra noise in the background, and to say, hey, mommy's got a call, mommy's in a meeting, you got to be quiet, and all of that stuff. And he plays video games, so that's loud. And my daughter thought it was an extended spring break when it first hit. Or coming down saying, can I go to my friend's house? And I'm like, nobody's house visiting. Like, this is not.
We said nobody's house visiting. No.
And my son actually ended up getting COVID. Ooh. So that was a challenge because I'm having to feed him from the ledge because everybody's scared to go in his room, but I
Oh,
had
wow.
stuff about, they need to go outside, that they need to, have vitamin D, vitamin C, immune system. So I'm like, we're serving him on trays, setting him on the ledge of the step, and then telling him he can come down.
Did we lose her?
We Lysol everything. So having to work and then make sure he's okay. And I don't know if any of you all had people that were directly related to you that got COVID, but here, health department called you every day. So they I was in a meeting. They're like, okay, how do you feel? And I'm like, I'm working.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So even just that, to me, it was very intrusive because your health is your health. And and I understand why they were wanting to contact trace and all of that, but it got to be so intrusive that it was my day, because they're like, well, we're just going to call back. And they were kind of rude.
Wow. Really?
I'll tell you the same thing. I'm working and he's fine. He's 18. He can talk to you. You don't have to talk to me.
Right.
So that part of it was a challenge too. And then just not being at home by myself, being able to work or think out loud, or, just that it was a challenge, but through it because they were older. But I could imagine if I had like kindergartners or
exactly
elementary kids who weren't self-sufficient. Like my daughter can cook, my son can cook. So I had to interrupt my day to do breakfast, lunch, or any of that. Like they were actually cooking me stuff. So that saved me from having to do that.
See, that was a plus.
It was a plus. But just not used to having somebody at home and them not always understanding that I can't stop to maybe help her with the homework assignment, or help him figure out what was going on with his body, or if he was okay. I couldn't just and be mom. I had to be an employee at the same time. And I'd worked from home for years, so it wasn't just me working from home, but being there was a challenge. And then it interrupted my office because I have a space where I say, okay, this is my office. So I was then confined to my bedroom because everybody's scared if you come downstairs, you can hear the toilet flush, the dog is barking, they're running around. But my job actually made these filters and they were great. So you could put this, so if you're in a meeting, it just looked like a background. Your dog's running or your kids running through the house half naked, so it made it a little bit easier. And a lot of jobs were understanding that there's going to be some noise. So it wasn't that much pressure like before when it was like, oh, you weren't, your kids are supposed to be at a babysitter, your kids are supposed to be at school. Because I think it happened as a pandemic worldwide.
Yes.
Your employers were more lenient and understanding that there is going to be some background noise, and sometimes I may have to go on mute. So if you're talking to me, please call my name so I know it's my that type of thing. So yeah, it was
right.
Yeah.
With Tequila, I want to say my sister had COVID and the same thing happened. They called her every day, and she's a little she has boys who are both in college and studying at home. And they didn't want to be at home with their mother. They were afraid they were going to get sick. So it was really complicated trying to, like you said, navigate the house, keeping everybody separate. And a couple of my students also had COVID, and their kids had COVID, and just navigating. But it was interesting how some people in the family would get it and others wouldn't. So I don't know.
None of us we never got it. I mean, we used. I thank God we had more than one bathroom, because we put them to one bathroom and we used the other one. And I would just go in every day and sanitize and spray down and wipe down doorknobs. Like I tried to follow all the guidelines and had it before. Like, how are you dealing with this? And we're all confined to this house. But I made sure every day he went outside for at least 15 minutes if he didn't do anything but sit outside. Because
that's good.
In the sun, and I just didn't want him to be in that room with those same germs. So that gave me kind of spray it down while he was gone, and then I changed the sheets and stuff like that. So, but I'm wearing it like in a hazmat suit because I'm walking around my mask and gloves and on, like just hoping nothing sticks. And my husband works in the food industry, so that was hard because we're like, if that's our other income that's gone.
Yeah, right.
Everybody's just got to stay apart. So that was the biggest challenge, is that I didn't have a hard time staying away from strangers, and I'm a people love to hug. I love to shake hands.
Mhm.
How do you stay away from your own kids? You know,
Right.
so
Exactly.
Gosh.
That's amazing. Now, Rochelle, do you have a question? Because I want to give my my co-host some space to ask some questions too.
No, I mean, I don't really have any questions. It's interesting to hear, the perspectives of, the challenges that people have had to go through with regards to just having to be the breadwinner, the mom, the wife, the 24-hour nurse. I think
Mm-hmm.
there's only so much that people can take, and a lot of times everything
Mm-hmm.
falls upon the mom or the
Mm-hmm.
the one
Yeah,
that is
you're kind of breaking up a little bit, so we're getting
that
like every other word.
role.
Uh-oh. I think we're losing her. Hopefully she'll come back in. Rochelle, we're not hearing you. Rochelle.
And
You're Rochelle. Can you hear me?
so
You're we're not we're getting
it
every
can be
other.
challenging and
I
difficult,
don't think
and
she can hear
sometimes
us.
people don't realize. Sometimes don't. Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
I don't think she
I can hear
us.
you.
But anyway,
you can't hear
can you
me.
hear?
But
Okay. Yeah, we can't it's like we're not hearing what you're saying. It's like muffled and it's like what do you call like it's fading in and out a little bit. Okay. But so I totally agree with Rochelle, like she was saying, it has definitely been something that everybody was going through, but everybody went through differently because everybody's household is different, right? And that's why we talk about the households, and Ondine's talking about some of her family and friends and students, and then the Tequila talking about some of what she went through herself, and even with one of her own actually getting COVID and having to navigate all of that and to navigate school and work, with everything. So it's definitely hats off because, and it was interesting to me. I want to find out from everybody, like, because the government played a certain role in this because it was a pandemic, right? But everybody's state was different because everybody's state is different. How did you feel that the government should, or still even now, should play a role or not play a role in this? Like, what role do you think they should play in this with the students, with the education and schools opening back up? Because I know I looked at some of them, and some states were ordered open, some states had partial openings, some states had it was like different ones. I was looking all around the United States and was surprised, like Washington State was one of the ones that was actually ordered open. West Virginia, North Carolina, Massachusetts, they were ordered open. Arizona, some grades were ordered open, but not the whole thing. So, I mean, what do you feel about government playing a part in education of schools going back? Let's start with you, Professor Ondine.
Oh, well, I mean, I work for a state university system, so we can't operate independent of the system. So when, the president of the system tells us we go back, we go back. That said, of course, it all depends on the numbers. I think probably we could go back pretty easily right now because our numbers are down. I think they have come out with guidelines basically saying that people didn't have to wear masks. I'm not so comfortable with that. I think we ought to keep trying to keep wearing masks because of variants. Well, we don't like masks. We don't like masks. But then again, I know we want to only look to ourselves as Americans for I don't know, intervention. But the reality is we live in a globe and everyone's suffering. And when we look at what others are doing and we see how it works or doesn't work, we really ought to go with what works. And, the early mask wearing actually was an, advantage. And that takes a cultural shift. Like we didn't want to shift to that as a culture. And then again, we had the situation of it became politicized if you wore a mask. So that was another issue, which is really a shame. frankly. I mean, it shouldn't be. It should be about science, right? Not about
Right.
politics.
Right. And so, what about you, Tequila? What part do you think government should play? I mean, government in general, not just state, but just government in general should play in schools opening back up, or not opening back up.
I think that they play a very large role because it's all government. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the CDC is government.
Mm-hmm.
FDA is government. So
Mm-hmm.
schools are governmental too. They have school boards. So depending on if you want to look at it on a micro level or a macro level, you have a difference of opinion of how much the government should be involved and what we would call running our everyday lives.
Mm-hmm.
The truth of it is that we're all entwined in this. And like you can't separate the government from people because we are a government of people, by the people, for the people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it makes it a challenge. And each school has a board. So they have to make those decisions. All of our governor did was provide the information. And Governor Andy Beshear, he caught a lot of flack from some of the decisions he made. I was in support of all of them because he'd never been in that situation and we had never been in it either. And he's following, what the CDC is saying to do and trying to do the best practices. But with something that's brand spanking new, and I mean, coronaviruses have been around. We're not going to act like we don't know that. But just like she said, this variant, it was different. And he didn't know either. So it's hard to set a precedence or a protocol off of something you've never had any experience with. And I think that if the government would have only just provided the information to schools and said, okay, here's what it is. Here's the numbers. Here's the pretty graphs. Here's what they mean. We're in this. And then let those districts decide what was best for theirs. Because that's kind of what we did. Like Fed, okay, well, we're in the purple and that meant we can't go back. But our numbers was because we have a large university here, the University. So when that opened back up, the numbers shot back up because it's from everywhere, international, local students, out-of-state students. So it just made it a challenge because it wasn't because Fayette County's numbers were actually really high, but they spiked our numbers. So what would you call it? I don't even know. I can't think of the word now that I'm trying to search for, but it wasn't like the normal. It was kind of like thrown in there to make the numbers skewed a little bit.
Oh, okay.
So it was hard, but I think if government would, like she said, not politicize it, not leaders coming out saying, well, the Democrats want you to wear a mask because they're bound to them, or they want you to take the vaccine, or the Republicans don't care about your life. They don't care if you die. So they want you to like nobody needed to hear that. We had people and all of that. And then and to me, the biggest misstep that the government made was the fact that they started to criticize each other in certain states. If I didn't agree with you politically and you were a Republican running your state, then you were wrong. And if you were a Democrat, you were wrong. So all Democrats have to agree to do it the same way, and our Republicans agree to do it the same way. But we're not the same states. Like New York, it's a dense place. Everything's like packed on top of each other. It's here, and it's I have family in rural Mississippi, and they're so spread out. I thought if any of them get corona, I know something's going on because miles away from their neighbor. So and they chose to do it a little differently, and that was okay with me. It was hard because you would hear these things, but if you went to another state, you didn't know if you were going to be stuck there, if you could get out, if you could travel, if you could come back. Have a test. Did it have to say positive or negative in so many days? Did you? It was just, they made it too convoluted and coming out saying sometimes we don't know, use your best judgment. Here's what we do know, and letting us make our own decisions.
Okay. Wow. I love real talk because it's real. It's like on whatever ends of the spectrums or wherever they come from. That's why we call it the Real Talk Show, because we're looking at things from different perspectives and being able to have, still great, loving, and very educated conversations, but real conversations, just like you all were saying, the real conversations. So, one of the things that I wanted to figure out too is like there is like young kids, like private schools, and then you have charter schools. A lot of them had different ways of looking at this. So how do you feel like, okay, government for the other schools, of course, because they're all entwined in the government, like Tequila was saying, right? But private schools and charter schools aren't. You know, like if they're not getting government funding, should they be regulated by the things that the government's coming out with as far as their schools opening and not opening? What do you think, Professor?
Well, I'll just offer that I think it's kind of complicated. So here's one example. I recently spoke with a man whose son works for a very exclusive private school. They went back in September. They're paying $30,000 a year or $50,000 a year, some insane amount of money to send their children to this exclusive school. They were okay. But the other side of it is their teachers aren't part of a union. They don't necessarily have the best healthcare coverage. And I always have to remind myself that, you know, we are a government, whether we like it or not, right? Like we're paying our salaries to pay for the healthcare of the teachers and the running of the school. So I honestly think it's a little more complicated than just sending the kids back. And that was part of the problem. My good friend who was head of the union in her district told me it was very challenging because many teachers were terrified to go back. In fact, they've retired early. And we have a big teacher shortage. And guess what? Now we've got so many people retired early because they're terrified. You cannot blame them, right? So it's very complicated. Sure. I kind of want to go back to what Rochelle said earlier about, look, homeschools had been doing it forever. You know, perhaps if we hadn't tried to make everything based on technology and went back to good old-fashioned books. And because reading a book, in fact, I just read a really interesting study that drew from a lot of different research on literacy, saying that we remember better when we read a piece of paper and we annotate, you know, going back to your grandmother.
Is that you, Rochelle? Rochelle saying she does? Is that you?
Yeah.
Is that you? She's like, yeah, that's her. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I sort of
you annotate like to read it, so you can annotate, and you're annotating while you're reading it.
In fact, my students all tell me they learn.
That's me too.
Yeah. So again, and I honestly sometimes I question. Sorry. The technology emphasis, because I used to work for a publishing company. I used to do teacher training, right? Guess how often textbooks are adopted? Every 7 years. That means they last 7 years. Laptops, how long do they last? Maybe 3, right? And then kids throw them around like even less. So now we're seeing our public schools and our tax dollars going to pay for computers, and who is benefiting from that? Computer companies. I mean, I'm sorry, but I got to follow the money, and sometimes it makes me angry, because it's our tax dollars that's being spent on a lot of things that are maybe not so wise. So yes, they need to learn technology, and yes, that's part of why they go to school. But the other side of it is, if we just had a textbook, that would have lasted a lot longer, right? If we'd sent home textbooks.
And that's the thing about it. That's, you bring up a good point on that. It's the books, you know, a lot of times, but you know, books were very expensive too. So that's the other thing about some students. They would, you know, they're finding that the ebooks are less expensive. They can be able to get it, because some of the programs that I work with, we've been finding that we can find the ebooks a lot cheaper than when we had to actually help students to buy the actual books. We would be spending, you know, at least $300 for one student, and that wouldn't even be covering all their books. You know, it depends on, you know, what level you're at, as far as like college level and different things like that. So, you know, I think it's real important to see that it has to be a balance. You know, like I think you need some technology in there, but I agree with you. You know, a lot of the things of going back to utilizing what's already been proven, like you were saying, even the homeschooling. That, a matter of fact, I had some my stylist actually when everything happened and everybody went home, her district allowed them to choose whether they wanted to homeschool or whether they just wanted to do virtual. She chose to homeschool.
Oh, wow.
And even though everybody's starting to go back, she's keeping her kids homeschool. So it's, you know what I'm saying? That's why I'm saying this conversation is very interesting and I love it, because everybody is different and depending on their circumstances, their households, and that works better for her doing it that way. And she found out that they ended up doing well, and she takes them to some sort of thing that they have where they can be able to have like the socialization skills, and they do something with the homeschoolers where it's still social distancing, but they do something where they do some sort of socialization. So I think exactly what you know we were talking about before. It depends on who you are, what your household is, what you do for a living, you know, just like with, you know, Tequila, you're at home, you already at home. Well, that makes it a little bit more convenient for you because you're at home. Other people had to try to refigure, now I got to go home and make my home office. And how does that look? And I don't have all my stuff here because all my stuff is at my actual office, you know, in the building, and, you know, trying to, you know, figure all those things out, but then had to be able to, you know, have their kids be right alongside of them, because a lot of people had to end up planning their like 2 or 3 hours where they would have to say, okay, I'm gonna be off during this time because I actually have to work with my child because they're in kindergarten and I have to be at the computer with them. You know, it was very, very different for some households that had younger children. I'm not really sure what.
Kim, I think that goes to show how much we came, if we didn't already, to appreciate teachers.
Yes.
In the world, I wanted to be a teacher. I don't know why I ever wanted to be a teacher, but I did. And then once I realized, okay, yeah, we as parents, we know, especially women, we are our kids' teacher, you know, on certain levels.
Yeah, of course.
But I was the parent who, if I didn't understand how to do the problem, I would write on your homework, so-and-so needs help with this, didn't understand, got to this step, and we were both confused. You know, they know they were trying, and you know,
I love it.
But, you know, but
Rochelle, you love it too, don't you?
I was a good student, you know. I like the thumbs up, Rochelle. I was a good student, so I think about that and think about how many parents maybe didn't graduate high school or didn't go to college or don't, you know, they just don't have that. To be able to teach their kids.
Tequila,
exactly.
There's math you don't use in your everyday life.
No.
You can't remember how to explain it.
And Google becomes your best friend. I was Googling math problems. I'm like, wait a minute. Ain't Sally deserves fudge? What was it? You know, you're trying to remember something you learned in the 6th grade.
Yes.
Every good boy deserves fudge, whatever that thing is.
She's like, what is it? Yeah, I know.
A squared, B squared equals C squared. And then every year there's a new version of math.
Right.
I go to my kids' school to learn the new math. And I can multiply faster than what you're teaching them. Well, we need them to know how to get the answer. They don't have to get the right answer. And I'm going, in what world? Like, making up answers like 2 times 2 is 4, and they dividing different. So even though my kids would get the right answer, they didn't do the steps the way
process.
They had to do it. So it would be like considered wrong. And so just imagine those parents that didn't, you know, weren't already involved or engaged in their school or up at the school or on the PTA. And, you know, because here PTA is a big thing. So if you don't go to stuff at school, they frown upon you like you're not in your kids' lives. And that's parents' work. And it's so hard. And so when you talk about homeschooling, that's a good option. And they had the model set up. But here, there were only so many homeschools you had, because like I even Googled it for my daughter at one point doing sports because I thought she wanted time. But certain programs weren't even available in our state. So we couldn't get, you know, we had the ABC Mouse and, you know, all those, but like the K through 12 learning, like, you know, as soon as COVID hit, you saw all those commercials. So but it would say when you Google them, not in your area, coming soon. So what do you know what I'm saying? So it just, I think, you know, with the private schools opening up, it made it a challenge because they got to have graduation. They got to go on with life as normal and didn't. and they didn't understand, well, why do these kids get all these things and have a graduation, and we have to do a drive-through graduation, and showed you, I think I hate to say this because people get so upset, but we're all equal as far as what, we're human beings, but we're all in the same economy, and the equality isn't always there because some parents are more affluent and have more access to funds to be, whether they planned it, saved or whatever they did, they had the tools to do it. And some parents don't have that opportunity to be able to afford, the private education. And for African American children, it's hard sending them to private school because there's not a lot of African Americans in the population. So the graphic is very different. So they oftentimes feel ostracized because no one looks like them. And picked on. Even here, we had in our Catholic schools, we had even Asian Americans getting picked on. And they would think the kids were there on scholarship or welfare or just for sports reasons. So a lot of our kids didn't even want to attend those schools just because they want to go through that, that bullying and to address it. And now we're at a point where the playing field is never going to be even. We can forget that. We keep saying, well, let's even the playing field. How can you? Because there's, the top and there's the middle and there's the bottom. But what gets cut out is the middle class, because a lot of things get provided to the lower income. When the higher income, they can afford it. There's no middle class. We just over the income to qualify for any of these energy bundles that they were giving away for free or whatever. So it's just like she said, it's an onion. It's so many layers. And it's so different. I can talk all day about that. I don't want to take your show because those things.
No, but this is what we do. We drop the mic. It's like when somebody says something that really we do the drop the mic. So you just drop the mic according to Rochelle. You just drop the mic. Okay,
it's just a lot. So yeah, this has been good. It's a lot, and I like what Odine said, because we do have models, but for some reason, if you don't agree with that model, you don't want to see what's good in it, and that's to us, because I don't have to agree with you politically on everything, but if you did something right, I can acknowledge.
Yeah, exactly.
So
well, and I think we've got to we need to listen to each other. I mean, this is one of my colleagues gave the best talk, I don't know, about 2 years ago, and she talked about she showed how in her classes she shows videos of people coming with completely different perspectives on topics, but they actually have conversations and they give reasons why they think that way. And in the end, people come a little closer together, right? I don't agree with
the conversations.
Where you're coming from. But
exactly.
Again, certain perspectives that just want to polarize, want people not to hear each other, not to understand, not to even question them. We have a problem. We have a big problem.
So I think
I do everything I can. I'm listening to Toni Morrison on tape right now. It's my book on tape. I do everything I can to expose myself to the African American perspective because I recognize my ignorance.
And that makes a difference, because I just think in general, we all have to be able to understand each other better. And I think that's not happening. People get just in their own world of this is what it is and this is what I know, and it's like, but we take time to understand somebody better, and I think we have to get out of the of trying to go around and spread seeds of hatred. Hatred is not good, no matter what language you put it in. Hatred is not a good thing. And so I think that's important for us to understand that we're human beings. This is a human problem as well. It's not it's not a race problem. It's a human problem. And when you're talking about schools and everything else, and you're talking about Asian Americans that were, getting ridiculed, as well as the African Americans, we're talking about a human problem. Every person that we're talking about, everybody, they are human beings. Yes. And what makes you think that you're going to make them different than you? Because you're a human being too. You're not different. You're human beings, but you come in different packages, but you're all human beings. So I think once we start to understand each other a little bit better and understand the realness of it. And Ondine, I appreciate, you always are very real about, hey, I recognize my ignorance and I'm trying to get better. Like,
Well,
when people are more open to that,
I'll put it that way. I
Right.
recognize my
Right.
privilege. I recognize that I will never understand being Black in America, but I definitely try hard to understand it. The other book I just finished that was so good was Alec Baldwin, and I'm trying to remember the name of it. I'm forgetting it offhand. I just finished it a week ago. I'm onto a new book already, and I forget the titles. But that book was very, what's it called? It's about a young man, a girl. It's from the perspective of a woman, and it's about her partner who, you don't realize it, but he's in jail. But it gives the human perspective of this guy who's been accused of a crime he didn't commit, and it's brilliant. I mean, it's so heart-wrenching. And I just thought, this book should have been in the canon because it was published in '76. It should have been in the canon of literature that all kids, not just, Black kids,
Exactly.
Black kids have to read, because I think, I think if that had been part of the canon, maybe what happened in the early '90s with those boys all getting thrown in prison wouldn't have happened, because people would have questioned and thought, what the heck? 15-year-olds aren't going to do something like that. That's nuts. Oh, really? I'm serious. Because I remember that case, and I remember thinking that and thinking, is this world gone mad? No, the world hasn't gone mad. News broadcasters have gone mad and demonized those poor boys and ruined their lives. It's disgusting. We should be so ashamed. And I'm sorry.
Hey, passion comes out. Real talk, passion comes out. It's all good. It's all good. It's all good. But I am going to have to bring us to a close, because we are at that time. I mean, it happened so fast, but I want Rochelle to be able to give us a last word. But before she gives us a last word, I want to you guys have a 1 minute closing statement that you would tell somebody, encouraging, women about, coming out of this with the schools opening, whether they have kids or don't have kids. Anything encouraging you want to say to women? Go on, Tequila.
I would just say, keep pressing on, keep trying, keep looking for information, keep questioning things and forcing people to answer your questions. And pretty much just keep being a mother, keep being a woman. The strength is in us. We know what to do. We know how to do it. Sometimes we just don't know when. And that's the thing. And so I think that these conversations like this, just talking to other women, other people, I heard a quote that said, we're all in the same storm, but we're not always in the same boat. And that's like, it's a different circumstance for everyone, but if we're open-minded, then my voice comes out. If we're open-minded, and like Ondine said, to listen. My key thing is to listen and not be so quick to judge.
All right, Ondine.
Absolutely. I'm just, give me books to read. I'll read them.
All right. Rochelle closes out now.
She's on mute.
You're on.
I'm not sure if my sound is going to hold up, but I think it was a great conversation today, ladies. It's not. Yeah, it's not. It's not.
It's not holding up. Okay. All right. I got you. Look, when she does this, yes, I know what that means. Okay. That's why we co-host. We have each other, right? That's how it always is. But we know that, I know she's been enjoying the conversation. She's been giving us all the nonverbals. See, that's what I'm loving, is that you can do nonverbals. Even when you can't do the verbals, you can read the nonverbals, right? So it's been definitely an elevated conversation. Awesome. In the safe space, a loving conversation. Thank you so much to our guests, panelists, Professor Ondine Gage, Ms. Tequila Hughes. Thank you. We appreciate you and all that you have done and what you continue to do. So continue to represent and go forth and have victory and peace. All right. Till next time. We'll see you guys. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.